So first off, again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you to the Michigan Beer and Wine Association for helping host this event. We've spoken at a lot of different NBWAs and just a lot of beer and beverage stuff. So some of this might be stuff you've heard before. Hopefully some of it's new, and we can help kind of guide you on a pathway. So first, understand energy efficiency. I think the first and foremost thing is to understand what are the drivers, right? So we'll kind of, number one, I wouldn't say this is the number one driver by any means, but just so you all have a big picture understanding of where the big boys are at. You know, Anheuser-Busch has a 25% reduction of CO2 and 100% renewable power, not generation, but maybe purchased by 2025. And then Molson Coors is pretty aggressive as well, wanting to reduce their emissions by 50% over the next few years. These are pretty big goals. And I just think that, you know, eventually, you know, we should all do our part to roll up to that. And then I think one of the big overlooked things about energy efficiency is all the benefits that come in the workplace, especially for employees. So talk about increasing light levels with lighting, reducing the hot and cold spots in the office. You know, so many of us have seen the heater under the desk, and what we do want is this: we want this guy to be comfortable and hang out down there. Increase sustainability to attract workforce, really, because the younger generations, I mean, I've written a bunch of papers on this about how that's really one of the drivers for this younger generation, the millennials. Track them and keep them, and show them we're doing good stuff. Reducing noise in CEWs and coolers. For those of you who have done some kind of variable air volume project in your keg cooler or your CEW, we can reduce, you know, noise levels drastically, and that's a huge safety increase right there. And then just reducing maintenance, obviously. And this is just a picture of lighting before and after. We won't really get into lighting too much today, but I'm hoping that a lot of you have already done it. The number one thing I think for all of us is, how do we become more profitable through energy efficiency? And so this kind of tells a story about cutting your energy usage 30%, increase your bottom line profitability by at least a couple percent. And it just depends about how big your energy budgets really are. And average IRRs, which is what's I think important to look for in building retrofits, is typically in the 20, 25 or greater, you know, up to 50, 60, 70% sometimes, which is really what is attractive to energy efficiency. You know, it's not as sexy as solar, but the ROIs are much better. And the average payback on an energy retrofit project is 25 to 30 months of a payback. There's a project we did for Schilling Distributing, and it was like let's see here, well, $4,600 a month savings. I won't get into all the details on that, but this is kind of where I try to use Yoda as my guide here. I think that these are the steps that I really try to get people to look at taking. And first is Energy Star benchmarking. So Energy Star, most of you know that brand, and they have the commercial buildings, energy use portfolio. I'll show you in a second. But really, benchmarking is getting to understand how efficient my building is right now. And you will be able to compare it to other buildings like yours in your region, which is important. Second one is understanding utility incentives and tax deductions that might help drive some of the paybacks down and just help the projects move. Obviously, identifying the projects is key. Figuring out how to implement them and how to fund them is something that we should just talk about, and we will talk about briefly. What's the overall goal of improving your NOI? And, you know, I know that each and every one of you are very efficient in your operations already. So to me, the energy budget's kind of like this black hole a lot of times where it hasn't really been looked at or considered. And if it hasn't been, then, you know, this is probably the road to start on. So we talked about Energy Star, and this right here is, you know, an example of a scorecard on your left. So this building, this is just like a mock-up, but if you're scoring 67 out of 100, then you have a lot of room for improvement. 75 or above will allow you to become Energy Star certified. So basically you get a sticker you can put on your front door. But more importantly, you know, like where you're at in the big scheme of things. And so if you want this worksheet that we prepared on the left, it's specifically for beer wholesalers, just email me and I'll send it to you. And I will be recording this and giving it back to Rebecca. I think what we'll do is we'll probably put it on YouTube, and so you guys can refer back to any of the stuff or email me for any of the collateral that you want. So the cool thing about Energy Star is you can actually put, like, if you are a 67, you can say, okay, well, I want to shoot to be a 77 or a 85 or whatever that number is. And then you could figure out potentially how much energy savings dollars that would equate to, which is really cool. So you can kind of reverse engineer it. Your utility, you know, a lot of you guys are on consumers and DTE. This is kind of the map of everything. And so if you're not on consumers and or DTE, you can use this Desire USA website. You can type your zip code in there and it'll pull up, you know, obviously your electrical provider, but who you already know, but it'll pull up their business incentive or commercial incentive program. It's usually called one of those two things. These are the links to consumers and DTE. I'll just tell you that each one of these programs, and pretty much all programs across the country, have over 100 incentivized applications that you can somehow take advantage of. I mean, you're not going to take advantage of all of them, obviously, because they're categorized to a lot of different things. And a lot of them are lighting, but it's only a chunk of them. So for those of you who have done lighting and have gotten a rebate already, you understand the power of, number one, the reduction in energy use, number two, the kind of incentives that can come with it, and the impact it can have visually in your workplace. So the custom incentive is what we try to drive with energy retrofits. And it usually ends up to be a little bit more money. And that could be a sidebar conversation if anybody wanted to have it. But the third thing we would talk about here on this page is that along with the Inflation Reduction Act came a commercial, it's called EPACT. I don't know if it's actually labeled on there, no. But EPACT's been around for years, and it was primarily for lighting. And then with this year, 2023, they introduced, like, Chris, if you're doing your HVAC, you might want to look into this, because the federal tax deduction that came on board with this is specifically for HVAC. And, you know, it really depends upon how you depreciate things within your own business. But I would tell you that the old HVAC that nobody ever used, because it was, or the HVAC deduction that existed before the IRA, was, you couldn't even really reach the targets. And this one is, if you improve the efficiency over 25% over what you have now, you're eligible for anywhere from, I think it's $1.50 to $5 per square foot. So it could end up to be a very large chunk of change. For those of you who are doing refrigeration projects, you're probably deducting that on a 5-year schedule. It's just kind of what I've heard a lot in the industry. And then lighting is probably a 2-year schedule, and that already exists in the EPACT. So, all right, move along here. Talk briefly about low-hanging fruit. The number one outstanding thing that is just, I try to really push people to do is preventative maintenance and cleaning. So this first one is some fellows I was just talking to in Wyoming. If you look at how dirty these coils are, it's insane, the deficiency that comes along with that. So cleaning coils regularly in anything that has a coil, right? So whether it's refrigeration, evaporators, condensers, HVAC, evaporators, condensers, rooftop units, replacing belts, replacing filters, and especially recharging refrigerant and making sure your refrigerant is at, you know, the correct capacity on an annual basis. All of those things right there could save you easily 15%, you know, give or take, obviously, if you're out of whack. Now, hopefully everyone has a preventative maintenance contract already in place, but if they don't, I highly encourage you to look at that on an annual basis. Just it's, you know, it's almost free by the time you take the maintenance reduction out of it that you'll achieve. Number two, evaporators and controls project. We've done this for several Michigan distributors already throughout the years. These usually have paybacks of 1 to 3 years. We'll talk about that in a second. Number three is lighting. If you haven't already done it, definitely move in that direction. And this is the one thing that if you've done lighting, but you haven't put occupancy sensors in the CEW, I think that kind of goes along with lighting to me in my book. So just controlling, you know, when you think about replacing a light bulb, you think about energy efficiency. And then when you talk about adding a control, you're really talking about conservation. And so whether it's the CEW or the keg cooler or the offices, a lot of offices have a lot of windows, and you can do daylight harvesting sensors, which will dim your LED lights if you have dimmable, and most LED lights come dimmable already. So adding sensors, and even to outdoor parking lot lighting, you can do dimming motion sensors, and typically there's utility incentives for those as well. And then rooftop units or split units are really low-hanging fruit. We'll get into that in a second too. All right, so this is a video. I'm just going to let it rip.
These motors
it's probably about a minute and a half.
Electricity 24 hours a day.
And this is for those of you who have refrigeration in CEW or a keg cooler.
When the system compressor is operating, which for most units is about 40% of the time. This means that for the other 60% of the time, the fan motor RPM can be lowered dramatically while still providing the necessary airflow in the box. The result, significant savings. Frigitech works in conjunction with the new 2-speed EC motors that are far more efficient than the shaded pole motors currently found in most walk-ins. Here's a demo unit that will clearly show the effectiveness of Frigitech. To the right is a fan being driven by a standard shaded pole motor. It's consuming about 149 watts. On the left is a new 2-speed EC motor. It is consuming about half the energy, or about 76 watts. Now we will simulate the compressor off cycle. The Frigitech controller will slow the EC fan motor to 600 RPM and is now only consuming about 5 watts of electricity. That's right, 5 watts, when before it was consuming close to 150 watts 24/7. When you do the math, this amounts to about an 80% reduction in power usage. And along with this comes a significant reduction in heat created in the box. The standard shaded pole motor will generate about 390,000 BTUs of heat per month. The 2-speed EC motor with the Frigitech controller will generate less than 80,000 BTUs per month. Now, with less heat being released in the unit, compressor runtime will be reduced. again, saving energy. Watch how this works. At a price of 15 cents per kilowatt hour, it will cost $655 to operate an evaporator coil with 3 conventional fan motors each year. By installing EC motors, the cost to operate the fans is lowered to $283, a 56% reduction in costs. However, by installing a Frigitech EC controller, the cost to operate the fan motors is reduced to $98 per year, an 84.9% reduction. There is no other single product on the market that can produce this kind of combined savings in a commercial refrigerator.
So I realized that was kind of a commercial, but the takeaways from that for all of us on this call are that a couple different things, kind of like the light bulb scenario. When you're thinking about replacing a motor, you're replacing with a more efficient motor, and then coupling it with a controller, you now have what I call compounded savings. You have the efficiency meeting the conservation, just like you do in that light bulb scenario or that lighting scenario. And this plays true for a lot of HVAC and refrigeration. The great part about it is when you have that compounded savings scenario, you end up with the custom utility incentive, which is kind of an engineered incentive from the utility. And that's where you get higher dollars. I've seen usually DTE and consumers will pay for anywhere from 20 to 30% of custom projects, which is pretty huge. And anyways,
these motors run.
That project right there is a real slam dunk project we've done a bunch of times. This is another one as an example. If you have RTUs, mostly for single zone RTUs, so it may or may not work in office situations. But if you have RTUs on the rooftop, simply by adding a VFD and controlling your economizer or adding an economizer, and then controlling the secondary damper face that is on the top. And then you're adding a controller and some logic to it. And you're basically reducing the overall energy usage on that device by 30 to 50%. And I don't really go into this too much, but just so you kind of understand there's a law it's called the fan law of physics. And it's basically like the more you reduce a fan speed, 10, 20, 30, 40, you exponentially reduce the energy usage. So it's just important to keep in mind when you're doing projects like that. So we'll kind of get into how to do some of these other things. So to start off on your own, there's 2 different things that we can look at. This is something that you could easily do operationally. I don't know who wants to work weekends or nights, but if somebody wanted to do what they call a treasure hunt, Energy Star has a treasure hunt for commercial buildings, and it's a checklist. You go through and you take a look at all the different things in your building. It's just an easy way for you to get started on your own. This right here is a little bit more of a checklist, and you can email me. I can send you both of these things. And these are literally things you could do within your own facility. And some of them are just looking at like nighttime and weekend setbacks on thermostats. And, are you plugging in your high-lows at the same time all at once and creating a spike in demand? So we won't go through all these because it would take just forever. But I'm happy to send you these and walk you through them individually if you need that. In terms of what we can help you with, we look at systems. So the refrigeration systems is the number 1 low-hanging fruit. Rooftop units is number 2. For those of you who are thinking about replacing your HVAC or your refrigeration, I've had many conversations this year already about how to do kind of a life cycle analysis to compare like what makes sense moving forward. And not to say that your HVAC or refrigeration contractor won't do that, but we're a third party who's maybe looking at it differently, and really trying to compare and contrast to give you a good long-term energy efficiency play. So we're here to help you with that if need be. But if anybody wants to look at a project, if they have a refrigeration system or RTU system or really any HVAC or lighting system over 5 years old, it might be worth looking at to see if there's energy savings to be had. And so email me and we'll send you the appropriate form to go with that. We're going to switch gears into project funding real quick. Most beer wholesalers who we've worked with in the past, these come out of capital budgets, but capital budgets don't always exist. Sometimes they're hard to get. Sometimes they take time. And, I look at it like time is cost of money, right? So there's a couple different easy ways to get into energy efficiency if you don't want to go through that CapEx process internally. And one is called efficiency as a service, which is basically like, the very simplest format. It is Spotify, where you're leasing music, so to speak. And so we work with a couple lenders who, I don't even know if you call them lenders, but they're folks who basically purchase the equipment and then own the equipment, and over a period of time share in the savings with you over 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or whatever it is. And we basically do the project, and we also maintain the equipment for you during the course of whatever the term was. So real simple, low-hanging fruit way to do things with the efficiency as a service. And then Michigan Saves has a great program. Specifically, this was the first green bank in the country program to incentivize energy efficiency plays. And they have rates down to 0%, which sounds crazy, but I think it's mostly really just for DTE and customers. We can help walk you through that process. And then I think that's it on that slide. Just, kind of some of the benefits of looking at doing funding as opposed to CapEx. Really, the biggest thing is just to eliminate the risk, because the projects do have a payback, and it's just a matter of doing the right engineering and figuring out what the payback is. Here's a couple of case studies that we've done, just to give you an example. This is O&W. This was their keg room. Annual energy savings. This was probably 8 or 10 years ago, I would imagine. Reduced quite a bit of energy in there. This one is Petaprin over in southeastern Michigan. I worked with Mark McDonald and Petaprin for years. Super good people there. And I think we did pretty much every energy efficiency project we could do, from lighting to refrigeration and HVAC, and just energy modeling and different kinds of lighting in different areas and such. But, one thing that comes along with any kind of energy efficiency project is you're saving long-term. Like, it's an investment up front, but these projects are saving forever for the 15 to 30-year life cycle of these systems. So I think that's important to look at. And then if you want to get a hold of me, what we can help you do is, either if it's something you want to do on your own with the Energy Star checklists or Energy Star benchmarking, happy to help you at no cost. We like to see this stuff done, and we're all about trying to reduce and repurpose and recycle and upcycle and all that good stuff. So we are really in the business of energy retrofits. We don't do new systems, but we can help you just on the specification side of it. So I'm going to open it up for questioning. If anybody has questions, just feel free, unmute and fire away.